All right, welcome to the Young Turks coverage of Bernie Sanders' town hall event on climate change. We are now going to analyze what they said, and I want to let you guys know that we're going to do this free for everybody on tyt.com/live and so many other folks that are joining us on the platforms, including our broadcast partners on the East Coast. But we will continue this conversation in about 15 minutes with Josh Fox. He's going to come and join us, and he is director of Gasland and a person who's fought against climate change for a long time and a great leading voice in this. And he'll be speaking to our members at that point. So tyt.com/join to become a member and hear that and the rest of our analysis. And we are doing a free trial right now at tyt.com/holiday. That's just a 1 week free trial. Give it a shot, see if you like over a dozen shows, progressive shows that we have in the network. Now, let's discuss what happened. There's, as usual with the Bernie Sanders town halls, there's several different things that I loved. One is the learning, things I did not know, and two, the clarity of the message in terms of who is at fault. I'll give you a teaser, it's the fossil fuel industry. But they were super clear about that, and you almost never see it in the rest of the media. And there's good reason for that, because the fossil fuel industry is a huge advertiser. And so pointing that out would be inconvenient, if you will. So let's go to the things that we learned. And some of these facts, some of you might know, but I think a lot of folks don't, and some of it was new to me, certainly the international ones. So the temperature goes up from 1.5 degrees Celsius, which it is increasing to 2 degrees Celsius globally. The difference between the 1.5 and 2 is 4 inches rise in the ocean level, and 10 million people worldwide would be affected by that in just 20 to 30 years. But it's not. I want you to understand, it's not binary. It doesn't happen like, hey, 30 years from now we wake up and what happened overnight? There's 4 inches of water on the ground, right? And one thing I did know, but I was reminded of in the middle of this, is in South Florida, where I lived for a number of years and is near and dear to my heart. Sometimes it floods when it doesn't rain, and so that's climate change. That's exactly what happens.
Just tears.
It's not the tears, although that's a good point. And unfortunately, we will have plenty of those.
Election,
Yeah, there was the Gillum election and the post-2000 election, and a lot of tears in Florida. But no, it's the tide rising, and so it has begun. So you'll be, whether it's in South Beach or in Fort Lauderdale, and all of a sudden there'll be a flood, and you're like, what on God's green earth is happening? It's not raining, right? Yeah. And so the oceans are in fact rising.
And I would also point out that what you just described, the additional 4 inches or so that they were talking about, if we go to 2 degrees additional, that's like the goal right now. A goal that many people think we can't actually get to with what's stipulated in the Paris Accords. That we have to advance beyond that quite a bit. That goal is a catastrophe.
Yeah.
So I mean, it sucks to have to say to the audience like that. There's no way that everything works out. Everything's great. We don't have mass migrations. We don't have worsening extreme weather events. The goal right now is to only have horrendous situations in all of those categories, but not cataclysmic, like not world-ending, species killing.
The Paris Agreement was to keep the global temperatures well below 1.5 degrees, I believe, or is it well below 2 degrees?
I think the goal there is 2.
Right, so well below 2 degrees Celsius rise, which we're on target to already meet way sooner than we were.
Yeah.
But again, the Paris Agreement, which the US backed out of, I think Saudi Arabia is still in, US not in.
At the G20, we were the only one that did not sign on to continuing to abide by it.
But that agreement is not binding, and that agreement does not take on the fossil fuel industry. I mean, I think it's really important what you said, Cenk, and I think that the town hall was great in that they talked about who is at fault and who is responsible. But unless we really problematize this and say the solution from here on out is not via corporate power and corporate control, and actually the fight for things like economic justice and for the future of our survival are really one and the same. And they come together under this banner of climate solutions and real climate, taking on and tackling climate change. We can't allow, and I was surprised, I think the town hall was great, but I was also surprised that there wasn't a lot of, I mean, Bill McKibben has said we need to treat the fossil fuel industry like enemy number one. The fossil fuel industry, and I think the ability to have corporations sort of, dump and or be not held accountable for the things that they're doing, not pay taxes, whether that's carbon taxes or other kinds of taxes. And even just allowing, British Petroleum to be like, we're beyond petroleum now because we do natural gas. And
oh, good.
Yeah, right, yay, because actually the sulfur emissions are way more trap carbon faster than regular carbon emissions, or you know what I'm saying? Sulfur's bad.
Yeah, the effect of sulfur and methane.
And Josh Fox, who will be on later, is gonna talk about this. And I think one thing that he talks about that I love is that we're already on track to lose a lot of land, and we're on track to lose a lot of loved ones, and we are on track to have a lot of climate refugees. If we think the Syrian civil war is bad, just wait for the climate refugee crisis. But how do we transition in a just way? We know we're gonna have to say goodbye to a lot of things. So where do we go? Is it just sort of like, let's dance until the world ends, screw it all, like woo, no. Do the rich get on a plane to Mars? We hope, but we're gonna need real solutions so that we can stave off the worst of the worst, right? So that we can still protect ourselves.
Right. So I want to touch on a lot of what you guys said, the fossil fuel industry, the catastrophe that's coming. But I wanted to give you guys the international examples that I was referring to earlier. So Germany has gone to 40% renewable energy by now, and it was a sustained effort, and there was a lot of. And in fact, the mayor of Georgetown, Texas, who's a Republican, Dale Ross, was on, and he talked about the same thing as the German climate scientist Camilla Bausch did, which is you've got to actually make your case. And so he said, look, I want to go to renewable energy, not because I'm a liberal, but because I wanted to save money. And so now we can get more business into our town because your electric bills are nearly nothing. And so it's a huge cost saving for business. And by the way, we took all this cost savings we had from our lower energy bills, which is a huge amount of money, and we put it into cops, firemen, parks, etc. And now, outside of a few holdouts who are like, oh, I just don't like anything that's liberal, it is in the middle of Texas. He said, but outside of those few holdouts, everybody's a believer. They're like, wait, my bill's lower. You told me it was gonna be lower, I was skeptical, and it is lower. You told me it was gonna be better for business, and it is better for business. And so, like, just even if I don't care about the planet at all, and I don't care about the floods, and I don't care about any of that stuff, I save money, I'm happy, right? So let's do more of that. And in Chile, they were really dependent on, of all things, coal. Okay, and other fossil fuels, but they had a bit of an import crisis because they import a lot of their gas, and they couldn't get it, and then they felt tremendous pressure. So that's why because of that crisis, they decided to go to more to renewables. Now they're up to 40% renewables, and they have now begun to phase out coal because they don't need it anymore. They don't need it in terms of energy, but they also don't need it in terms of jobs because of all the jobs they created with renewable energies. And so I didn't know the details of that story about Chile, and so I learned that, and that's exciting. And it's great to see, whether it's in the middle of Texas or in a country like Chile, that when you actually take action, it works, it lowers costs, it creates jobs, and saves the planet. That's a triple win. And I think it'll help to reach out to a lot of people. On the fossil fuel industry, great example was in Colorado. There was a great bill about fracking, and the activists spent money on it, and they're the ones that put the ballot measure, ballot measure forward. And then the fossil fuel industry came in and outspent them 40 to 1. 40 to 1. And so, was it a fair fight? Did people get both sides, fracking against fracking, and then make up their minds? That's a mythology that television pundits tell you? No. One side did not get their message out at all, and the other side totally inundated everyone with their misleading message because they had such a huge money advantage. Bernie pointed out the fossil fuel industry spent $1.7 billion on campaign contributions and lobbyists. They didn't spend that for their health, and in fact, that is what's destroying the health of the planet, because if you removed what I call bribes, and they're legalized bribes that the fossil fuel industry gives to our politicians, we would have begun to fix this decades ago, because there is no counter argument. Look, almost all the world's scientists say it. They said it 30 years ago. Bill McKibben talked about it in the town hall. That James Hansen came to Congress and explained it, and people like Al Gore and Bill McKibben were like, they're right, that makes sense, and they started to take action. But if you didn't believe them 30 years ago, well, look at what's happened in the 30 years. They've been proven exactly right. All their predictions have come true, and have come true earlier than expected.
And
right?
where's the accountability when ExxonMobil, we know, knew about the climate science in the 70s and was hiding it from the public and continued to carry on, and then tanked the electric car, et cetera. So I mean, I think that there's a lot of, there's money in holding the fossil fuel industry accountable as well, and not only the fact that like they've allowed us to politicize the sun at this point as a solar, that's a liberal issue. Like, no, it's not. It makes economic sense, and I think now that you're seeing, some amount of GDP losses being estimated in terms of what climate change and climate catastrophe is going to take from the United States, right, and from many different countries. Now that that's being put into like money terms, now you see the powerful and fossil fuel industries getting concerned, and they're already concerned. I think what I liked about this town hall was the way that it is a progressive agenda, and I think that we need to put just as much pressure on Democrats as Republicans on this issue. And you see Sanders and Ocasio, it's no mistake or coincidence that they're the ones leading this. In California here, you've got Jerry Brown. He approved a record amount of gas wells and fracking wells, right? So it's something like 23,000 in his tenure, oil and gas drilling permits were allowed under him. 3/4 of those, so majority of those, are in low-income communities of color, right? So when we talk about a just transition away from fossil fuels, it's about helping those communities who are primary in the crosshairs of all of that pollution and all that. So it's Democrats like Brown and people who say on paper, oh yeah, we're gonna commit to the Paris Agreement and yeah, stick it to Trump, and yet in their own state, they're approving new permits and they're not actually finding a way to transition. Brown's newest idea, 2045, we're gonna be 100% renewable. We don't have till 2045. Like, we don't have that time. We need to start enacting that now. And that doesn't mean he was like, well, all the cars will be off the road. No. That doesn't mean that at all, but you can't wait till 2045.
Yeah. So one of the guests made a similar point about Governor Hickenlooper in Colorado. He's also a Democrat, also approved a ton of fossil fuel industry initiatives, et cetera. Then you got Justin Trudeau in Canada that approved pipelines. And it's not to do a false equivalency, but unfortunately the corporate Democrats oftentimes do go along with the corporate Republicans. Yes, the corporate Republicans are worse. They would do nothing instead of taking action too late. Okay, and those seem to be your two choices until now. But you do have Bernie Sanders fighting, and he has been throughout. Ocasio-Cortez was one of the guests on, and she wants to push for the Green New Deal that creates a ton of jobs. But she also wants a select committee in the House. And you might think, oh, well, that sounds mundane. I don't know what a select committee does. No. It would be an umbrella group to make sure that all these initiatives are actually taken up and actually take action on it instead of just sitting around talking about it. But the most important part of it is no one is allowed on the committee if she gets her way, and that's the request of the Sunrise Movement, the Justice Democrats, and Ocasio-Cortez, that takes fossil fuel industry money because we don't trust them. The whole point of the fossil fuel industry is to corrupt politicians.
Right.
So if you allow those same corrupt politicians, just because they're Democrats? No, if you allow them on the committee, they will kill all action on it. Do you know that in 2020, a lot of the renewable energy credits expire, okay? So basically subsidies, and you say, oh, well, good, the subsidies, I'm a Republican, I don't like subsidies. But the fossil fuel credits do not expire. And they've been around for about 100 years. That makes no sense at all. And so we have got to take action. It is, in essence, like a meteor about to hit the planet. All the scientists have agreed it is gonna hit. We've got to take action now. A lot more when we come back for the members at tyt.com/join. Please join now. tyt.com/holiday is a good way to do it. We'll see you there. Like what you see? Click the subscribe button below and don't forget to ring the bell to never miss another video from the Young Turks.